Good morning, boys and girls. We have another snow day today, so that means we have another virtual lesson that we have to do. Today's lesson, we're going to kind of pick up where we left off yesterday. I didn't hear from really hardly anybody in Tuesday's lesson about how to make those factor trees. So that tells me that almost every single person watched the video, at least I hope, and that you understood exactly what it was that I was asking you to learn about yesterday. So that makes me real proud. So thank you for all of you for doing that. But we're going to carry on. We're going to move into what's next. The second lesson in chapter 5 is on common factors. So again, you're going to be taking some notes. If you don't have your notebook with you, not a big deal. All you need to do is just get an extra sheet of paper and then hang on to these pieces of paper. Or if you even have a spare notebook at home, you could be doing this in like a spare notebook. And then when we get a chance to get back to school where our items are, we'll just tear out these pages or take these loose leaf pieces of paper and staple them into your notebook so they will be where all of your other notes are. But it is important that you're taking these notes because you're going to be needing these as we move through chapter 5. So today's lesson's on common factors, and we don't have a whole lot of notes today to take, thankfully. But if we kind of look at what we're going to get into today, we're going to learn one key thing, and that is called the greatest common factor. Okay, so in your notes right now, I want you to title your notes today, Lesson 5-2, Common Factors, and then you're going to copy greatest common factor. And you're going to hear Miss Malone call this a lot GCF. Okay, it's kind of the short abbreviation for greatest common factor. So if you see on your tests or on your quizzes, directions might say find the GCF, just know that what you're being asked to do is find the greatest common factor. So how do you go about doing that? Okay, well, first off, the definition for a greatest common factor is when we list the common factors of each of the two numbers, the largest number that they have in common is known as the GCF. So again, I know you're needing to write this stuff down, and as we've talked in school, sometimes having to write and listen at the same time is tough to do. So because you're virtual right now, you can just hit the pause button, copy down the notes that you need, and then come back to the video when you're ready to catch back up with what we're learning about, okay? So the steps to finding the GCF are listed right here, and you need to put these in your notes. They're pretty simple. Some of you may already know how to do this, but for step number 1, the first thing you're gonna do is list the factors of each number, and we're gonna practice some of these so that you feel more comfortable with this before I just give you the assignment that you're gonna work on today. Once you list the factors of each of the numbers, and again, remember this math vocabulary. Factors are the numbers we multiply together to get whatever the number it is that we're playing with, okay? So if we think about the number 4, the factors for 4 would be 2 times 2, because that gives us 4, but also 1 times 4, because those would also give me 4. So if I'm thinking about the factors for a 4, there's a couple of different options. Once I've listed the factors of each of the numbers, the second step is then you're going to select the greatest factor that the list has in common, okay? I got a typo here. Hang on, I got to fix it. All right. Once you have all of the factors listed, and once you've selected the greatest one or the largest one that you notice is in each list, you're going to circle that, and it's going to be known as the greatest common factor. So let's kind of experiment with one. So down here, I'm giving you two numbers, 15 and 27. So if we follow what the steps say to do, step 1 says we're going to list the factors of each number. So for factors for 15, so this means in my head right now, I'm thinking, what are all the numbers that I can use and multiply together to get 15? And so when I think about that, I think, well, 1 times 15, that would give me 15. 3 times 5, that would give me 15. Is there anything else? I don't think so. So those are all of the factors for 15. And notice how I kind of wrote them in order. We learned this yesterday, from the smallest number to the largest number. Let me jump you to a different page and kind of ignore this graph for a minute, but I want to just kind of show you, because some of you might be saying, well, how'd you do that so quickly, Miss Malone? If the number that we're playing with is 15, and again, remember, I'm doing this with a mouse, so my writing may not be the greatest, but if I'm thinking about what numbers I can multiply to get 15, well, I can use a 1, and I can multiply 1 times 15. That would give me 15. But is that it? I'm going to keep going. Okay, well, what about 2? Is 2 times anything 15? No, 2 times nothing's 15. What about 3? Is 3 times anything 15? Oh, yeah. 3 times 5 is 15. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of write those down, because I'm kind of taking a little bit of notes here. 3 times 5 is 15. What about 4? Is 4 times anything 15? No. And then I've come to 5. Well, 5 is already listed here. So since it's already in my list, I know that's all my factors. There aren't any more than I can have. So these 4 numbers, 1, 3, 5, and 15, those are called my factors for 15. So if we jump back to that page that we were just on, all I did was take those factors and I put them in order from the smallest one to the largest one. Now, the directions are asking me to compare 15 and 27. So now let's look at the factors for 27. So if we come back over there to kind of like our work page, and let me get rid of this for the moment. But if we come back over here to our work page, and now we try to kind of brainstorm, what are the factors for 27? That's the number that we're thinking about now. All right, well, let's start with the one that we know to be the basic and the easiest, and that's 1. 1 times what is 27? Well, we all know that's 27. So now we have to just keep moving down the line. What about 2? Is 2 times anything 27? No, 2 times nothing's 27. What about 3? Is 3 times anything 27? Yeah. You know your multiplication facts, so you should be telling yourself 3 times 9 is 27. What about 4? Is 4 times anything 27? No. I know that 4 times 7 is 28, but I'm not looking for 28. I'm looking for 27. What about 5? Is 5 times anything 27? No. What about 6? Is 6 times anything 27? No. 7. What about 7? Will 7 work? And notice how I'm going to keep going until I get to like the highest number here that I've used. 7 times nothing will work. 8 times nothing will work. 9, well, here it is. It's already in my list. So again, I have found my factors. So these 4 numbers, 1, 3, 9, and 27, are my factors. And that's why I have them listed here. 1, 3, 9, and 27. So step 1 told us to list the factors, and we had to kind of do a little brain thinking to figure out what those factors are. If you think, boys and girls, I know you might have noticed yesterday when you were playing with your factor tree, some of the numbers were really big numbers. But one of the things that we just finished learning about in our division chapter was those divisibility rules. So if you know your divisibility rules, it's going to really help you to kind of know what numbers will work with some of these bigger numbers that we're playing with. All of this stuff that we're learning builds on all of the stuff that we've learned in chapters before. Okay, so step 2 now tells us to select the greatest factor that the lists have in common. So I look at my list for 15, and I see a 1, a 3, a 5, and a 15. I look at my list for 27. I see a 1, a 3, a 9, and a 27. Well, the factors that they have in common, they both have a 1, but they also both have a 3. But if I'm searching for the greatest one, that would be the largest one, the 3 is the largest one that they have in common. So the greatest common factor is 3 for these two numbers. Okay, so that's a really quick lesson on how to find the greatest common factor. And right here, these little steps to finding the GCF will kind of help you. For those of you that are a little bit new to this, use the steps. It's kind of like a recipe. Use the steps to know, what do I do first? What do I do second? What do I do third? And then you'll easily be able to kind of walk yourself through today's activity, since we're not at school together to do this in person. So I want to kind of play with a little bit more, just because, you know, today on your assignment, you are going to see a little bit of a graph that's going to look similar to the one that I've drawn here on my screen. And again, I know it's not the best, but, you know, So what your graph's going to have you do, the graph's going to have 4 columns. The first column is going to have the number listed. The second column is going to be empty. It's going to be blank. This is where you're going to have to think about the factors that go with the number that are in that row. The third column is the common factors. No, that's hard to read, but this is where you're going to find the numbers that they have in common. And then the last one is going to be the GCF. So this is going to be where you kind of break down all of what you brainstormed and you find the number that's the largest. So let's start with 18. We're going to kind of do this graph together because today on your homework, I'm going to kind of flip you to the page. You're going to have an assignment today and it's going to have a graph on it. And you might be looking at this graph right now going, oh my gosh, Miss Malone, that's so much for us to do. This is actually your workbook page. If we were at school and we finished this lesson in the classroom, I would have given you an assignment to do for homework. And that assignment would have been to complete workbook pages 100 and 101. Unfortunately, because you're not at school, you don't have your workbooks. So what Miss Malone has done is I have retyped your workbook page into a document for you to practice on from home without needing your workbook pages, okay? So this would actually be what you would have had to do, even though it kind of feels like it's a lot. So what we're going to practice today is going to help you with what you're going to be doing right here on the assignment for today. So the first thing we're going to do is list the factors for 18. So we got to think, what are the numbers that are going to help me to get to 18? And some of you are going to be able to do this without having to write stuff out. Others of you are going to need to kind of come over on a little work page or something and kind of write this stuff out so you can see it easier. So what are the factors for 18? Well, we did this a minute ago when we were talking about our example, but obviously 1 times 18 will give me 18. If I keep moving, what about 2? Well, yes, 2 times 9 will also give me 18. What about 3? Is 3 times anything going to give me 18? Well, you should be sitting there going, yeah, Miss Malone, I'm telling you, 3 times 6 is 18. Okay, I can hear some of you through the screen. 4 times nothing is 18. 5 won't work, and 6 I already have listed in my little bunch here. So these are my factors for 18. So how am I going to list those factors? I'm going to list them in order from the smallest one to the largest one. So over here in my little column, I'm going to write 1 because that's the first one that's a factor. 2 is a factor. 3 is a factor. Hope I don't run out of space. 6 is a factor. 9, I'm going to move it down here. Oopsies, this is hard. 9 is a factor. And then the last one, which is the largest one, is 18. Okay, so in that little section there, I have listed all my factors. All right, now over here, common factors. Well, I really can't do that yet because I haven't compared it to another number. So I have to do another number first. So let's move on to 24. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to brainstorm what are all my factors for 24. Okay, so some of you are catching on to this now and you might be working ahead of me and moving faster than me, but 1 times 24 is 24. Keep on moving. 2 times 12 is 24. Okay. 24 is a pretty common number, so it's going to have a lot of factors. 3 times 8 is going to give us 24. So again, I hope you're noticing how important knowing your multiplication facts are. 4 times nothing is 24. 5 times nothing is 24. 6 times something is 24. So I'm going to say, yeah, 4 times 6 is 24. And that should complete my list. So I have all of these guys are my factors. So now I have to come in this little section here and I have to list what all of my factors are. So I'm going to put them in order from the smallest one to the biggest one. So I've got 1 as a factor, 2 is a factor, 3 is a factor, 4 is a factor, 6 is a factor. That's the next one. That's the largest. 8 is a factor, 12, and then the last one, oh, I'm getting sloppy, sorry, is 24. Okay, oof, that didn't turn out too good. Okay, there we go. So here's all of your factors for 24. And just because I don't want to waste a whole bunch of time in this video. We're just going to skip 30. Some of the examples that you might have on your homework assignment might actually have you do like 3 of them. Okay, so if that's the case, then you're just simply going to have to compare all 3 of them. We're not going to do that just because we're going to kind of save a little time. All right, now common factors. Let's move on to the next column. So what we have to figure out now is what are the numbers that 18 and 24 have in common? What are the factors that I see in each of these boxes? Well, in each box I see a 1, so I'm going to go ahead and put that in my box. In each one I see a 2 because they each have a 2 in their factors box. They each have a 3, so I'm going to put that in my common factor box. What about a 4? Do they each have a 4? Well, this one does, but 18 does not, so I can't put 4 there. What about a 6? Oh, yeah, they both have a 6, so I need to put a 6 in my common factor box. What about 8? Well, I see an 8 down here, but I don't see it up here, so that won't work. This one has a 12, but this one doesn't. This one has an 18. This one doesn't. This one has a 24, and that one doesn't. So that's all the common factors. So they each have a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 6. So now our job is to figure out what's the greatest common factor. So obviously, I hope you're looking and noticing, oh, well, out of the common factors that you have listed, the 1 in each list, that is the largest, is going to be 6. So when we are comparing 24 and 18, the greatest common factor that we will get is a 6. Okay, and that's how we go about filling in a graph where we're comparing 2 numbers and trying to find the greatest common factor between those 2 numbers. Okay, now the only other thing that you will potentially be asked to do today on your assignment. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get rid of this big giant kind of graph here for a moment, just because we only have limited space on this little whiteboard that I'm working on. But so the other thing that you'll be asked to do, so you'll kind of notice that there'll be directions, and down here the directions will say list the common factors for each of the sets of numbers. 7 and 13. Okay, so it gives you those 2 numbers. We did a practice with that when we did our notes today. So that was just like this example right here. So you just have to list the factors and then find the one that's the biggest one, the greatest one that they have in common. So you shouldn't have any difficulty with this section because we already talked about how to do that. Come down here where it says find the greatest common factor of each sets of numbers. That's pretty much the same thing. The only difference between this section down here and this section up here, this section wants you to list all the factors and then circle the one that's the greatest, where this one down here at the bottom isn't asking you to list the factors. It's just asking you to find or to say which one's the greatest. Now, obviously, you know you can't find the greatest one without listing all of them. But in the answer line here, I don't need to see all the factors. I only want to see one number for each one of these problems. Each one of these examples, there should be one number that 16 and 28 have in common, and it should be the largest number that they have in common, okay? Then as we keep moving down, which sets of numbers have a greatest common factor of 4? So again, you're going to have to list the factors to figure out which ones have a greatest common factor of 4. And notice it says select all that apply, which means more than one of these is going to have a greatest common factor of a 4, okay? And then 17 says, can a greatest common factor can a greatest common factor be greater than one of the original numbers? So like, could you maybe have a greatest common factor, like in this example, that would be like 6. So you should be asking yourself, I don't know if that would work, because you know, if you're thinking of all the factors for a number, you should never have a factor that's larger than one of the numbers that you see listed there. And then there's just a little word problem to kind of give you some higher level thinking, and that will conclude the assignment for today, okay? So just to kind of work through one more to make sure everybody understands, and I'm just going to kind of make one up. So let's say we're trying to find the greatest common factor between, let's say, 12 and, I don't know, let's do 12 and, let's do 40, 12 and 40, okay? So step one says I'm going to list all my factors, okay? So let's start with 12. Let's list the factors of 12, okay? So if you want to brainstorm, you can kind of do that over here to the side. So I know that for 12, I need to do a 1 times a 12. I know that I need to do a 2 times a 6. I know that I need to do a 3 times a 4. And that would be all of my factors. Now, I know some of you love to do math in your head, and you know Miss Malone is not a huge fan of that because I think you'll get to the point where you're old enough and kind of a little more mature where you can handle doing most of this inside your head, but you're kind of at the beginning learning stages of this. And sometimes by doing too much in our head, we miss factors, and that can cause us to get the whole answer wrong. So if we think about factors for 12, here's all of our factors. We're going to list them in order. So it's a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 6, and lastly, a 12. Okay, so in that section on your assignment today where it says list the factors, the section that is down here where it says list the common factors for each set of numbers, you're going to have to list the factors for 7, and then you're also going to have to list the factors for 13. I don't know that you're going to have space to do that right here. So you might want to end up doing these right here on a separate sheet of paper and then send me a picture of that work so that I can see that you practice that, okay? So here's my factors for 12. All right. Well, I have to find the factors for my other number, which in this example is a 40. So let's come down here and let's write 40. All right, well, what are my factors for 40? So let's come over here because this is kind of a little workspace for us. And let's think, what are our factors for 4? Well, I've got a 1 times a 40. That'll give me 40. And the bigger numbers, the more chance of more factors, okay? I've got a 2 times a 20. That'll give me 40. Let's see. What about 3? Will 3 work? Let's think of my divisibility rules for 3. My divisibility rules for 3 says that if I add all these together, if the sum of these numbers can be divided by 3, then this would work for 3. So when I add these together, 4 plus 0 is 4. Can I do 3 divided by 4 and get a perfect answer? No, I cannot. And so therefore, 3 will not work. It doesn't go into 40 perfectly. What about 4? Oh yeah, 4 will work. So I can do 4 times a 5. I'm sorry, a 4 times a 10, not a 5. 4 times 10 gives me 40. All right, what about 5? Is 5 going to work? Well, yeah, I know my multiplication facts. I know that 5 times 8 is going to give me a 40. Okay, what about 6? Is 6 times anything 40? Well, I know the divisibility rule for 6 says it has to work for 2 and 3 for it to work for 6. And I see here in my list it worked for 2, but it didn't work for 3. So I know it's not going to work for 6. What about 7? 7 times anything 40? No. And my 8's already listed. So these are all my factors. So now I'm going to list them, okay? And I'm going to list them in my order. So I have my 1 goes first, 2's a factor, 4's a factor, 5's a factor. And notice, are you picking up on a pattern here? These kind of go in order from this side down, and then it swings around and goes back up this way to kind of list them in the proper order. So if you didn't pick up on that, that's kind of a cool little thing to notice. So I've got my 10, my last factors are a 20, and then a 40, okay? So notice, bigger number, more factors, lots of factors for 40. So now our job is to figure out which ones they have in common, okay? So notice in the directions, it just says to list the common factors. All right, so we have to figure out which ones do they have in common. Okay, so I see that they have, and again, I'm going to kind of erase my workspace over here because I'm limited on how much room I have. All right, so they have a 1 in common. What else do they got? I see, and I'm just going to kind of cross it out so I don't accidentally forget one. They have a 2 in common. I'm going to write that, and I'm going to cross that out because I already listed that. They don't have any 3, but they do have a 4. So I'm going to list my 4 over here because that's a common factor. 6, I don't see a 6 down here. A 5, I don't see a 5 up there. A 12, I don't see a 12. And all these bigger guys, well, they're not up there. So that's it. Those are my only common factors. So if I was working for this problem right here on my assignment today, I would list those common factors right here. Okay, so I would list 1, 2, and 4 on that line if I was looking at these numbers, but I'm not using those numbers because Ms. Malone didn't want to do a problem that you're going to have to do later today. Okay. The last part, though, of that activity says circle the GCF. So now we have to figure out if these are the ones that they have in common, which one's the largest? 4 is the largest. So if somebody asks you what's the greatest common factor between 12 and 40, your answer would be 4. Okay. 4 is the GCF. So I hope you understand what we did today. I tried to break it down in a pretty simple way. You have the notes here that you need to kind of make sure are in your notebook and that you follow. You have the steps here to kind of help you through it. I gave you some examples. We practiced filling in a chart and a graph, and I even walked through what your assignment is going to be today so that you hopefully don't have any questions of what you're supposed to do on any of these. The only thing I'm going to remind you is just please make sure that when you finish this, you turn in the document. I'm still having some of you guys turn it in. You're hitting the turn in button and you're not turning anything into me. So I don't have anything to grade and look over. Okay. And it's important that, again, that you're watching these videos, you're taking the notes, because whenever we do come back together, which that will probably be sooner than later, I think this snow is pretty much coming to an end. We're going to catch up like right here in the middle of chapter 5. So if you haven't taken care of your job from home, which means taking notes and watching the videos and reaching out to me with questions if you have them, then you're going to come in and everybody's going to be ready to move forward and you're going to be pretty lost. And we don't really have time to redo things that you already were supposed to learn. So if you don't need me for anything, I hope you get a chance to enjoy the snow a little bit today, maybe, and you're not locked into having to do so much work throughout the day. But as you know, send me an email or reach out to me if you need help. I'm here to kind of help you figure it out. Bye, boys and girls.